by Michael Giamacco and those alone. My name is Elise Giamacco Carlson of Duo Daemonologie. Last week, the guys needed to attend to some duo-related business, but this week they are back live. While I'm sitting here talking about duo business, and before the gentlemen begin their broadcast from James's famous room, as we say, please take a minute to like and share this broadcast with friends. They can always watch it later, but watching live allows them to ask questions and make comments on the message board. So while you're sharing this link, here's some information you may find useful. Saturday is our sold-out visit to the USS Salem, the Sea Witch. If you're a ticket holder, you should have received an email from us about the protocols in place for that evening. If you did not, send us a message on Facebook or by email, and we will make sure we'll get that information to you. Duo Daemonologie will be at Parafest, Maine on October 17th, and we will be at Wilson Castle in Vermont the following week, October 24th. See the Duo Daemonologie Facebook page to learn more about these events and more. We, you might have heard, have a special guest tonight, Steve DiSchiavi, that no-nonsense guy from the Dead Files. And the title of tonight's show is, Can the Murderer Return and Haunt Their Killer? Can the murdered return and haunt their killer? I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I personally find this question interesting as a person with a background in public safety and an interest in the paranormal. When a serious crime is committed, there is trauma. The perpetrator may or may not be caught, and even if suspected, they may or not be punished for the crime, dependent on many factors. If they're not held accountable, can justice be meted out in a different way? Might it be possible for a victim to reach out from beyond the grave and accuse the person who took their life? We're here to discuss that tonight. As the discussion progresses, I'll be here to relay your questions and comments to the duo and to Steve. They've asked me to keep on topic with our discussion, so if you have a question about something else, you're certainly welcome to send a message to the Duo Facebook page or to our email at duodaemonologie.com. Or perhaps take a look at the website to see if we've discussed that topic on past shows. That site has the more common spelling of demonology, demonology.org. So, once again, it is my pleasure to turn this over to the duo, author and demonologist Carl L. Johnson and deacon seminarian James Annitto, and of course our guest, Steve DiSchiavi.
It is everybody.
Hello.
Hi there.
Good introduction.
Hey guys.
Yes,
Hello,
thank you.
Steve.
At least sets the tone for our show.
Okay, everybody. Tonight, my name is James, Carl, Elise, and Steven, of course, if you haven't watched the show before. And we are Duo Daemonologie. And then, of course, Steve. I don't think he needs no introduction for the people that are watching the show. I think more people are tuning in to watch Steve than Duo, which is fine.
Doesn't he have a reputation for being
does.
outspoken, or
I think so. But
speaks his mind kind of guy?
I think that's why people love him, though.
He's going to mute it for us. Maintain the equilibrium.
So there are a lot of connections tonight. And of course, we had Brandon on the following week before Brandon Alvis. And there was connections that we'd like to bring up. Some of the connections we have the guest tonight, Steve, is Elise. Elise has a background in criminal justice. Carl was on Ghost Hunters, which was a long-running series, just like the Dead Files. And I'm from New York. And so is
from
Steve.
New York, so
it's like a trifecta.
Or triathlon.
Triathlon too, right?
Yeah.
So Carl, not to put you on the spot, but you kind of wanted to ask this question that our main topic is tonight.
What question?
Oh, come on! Don't play games.
I mean, the title of the show.
The title of the show.
Yes.
But one of the things that you asked me about within this topic is do you think we can get Steve DiSchiavi a part of this topic? And I said, let me do this. And it happened. I think it's a very interesting topic, something that I think has been adapted in a lot of pop culture, especially one of my favorite movies, Lucky Bones, with I believe Matt, what's his name in it? Mark Wahlberg's in it.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. I thought Matt Damon, but it's actually Mark Wahlberg. But that's a good movie, and it has a lot to do with the topic we're talking about. The little girl was murdered, and she tried to get in contact with her family. And she eventually
was found. The Sixth Sense is like that too. It pervades that theme pervades that movie.
It does, definitely as well.
You got a common theme of somebody's deceased. This decedent is reaching out from beyond the grave. They can't normally communicate. They can't come to trial, but they're somehow getting the point across that their life was taken, and they want some kind of, if not retribution, some justice, some recognition, of what happened.
Most definitely.
And that's a theme throughout history. Like no grass shall grow in my grave for a generation. Is it's thought that happened. All that. But how does that apply to our modern world? Is there any relevance to that? So that's what we're here to discuss. We're wondering, is it at all even feasible? That someone whose life has been taken, they're no longer among the living, would they be able to permeate, like this, our world, and just make that statement, get it across that, their life was taken? I don't know. That defies logic. It shouldn't be, but maybe it is. So, that's the question we want to ask. I can't answer it. This show is not about answers so much as raising the questions and like reviewing them and discussing what are possibilities, what do people think, what have been our experiences. So, Mr. Steve DiSchiavi, in your vast experience with law enforcement and criminal justice, and of course the paranormal research. Paranormal almost has a bad connotation sometimes. Sometimes I say preternatural. It's harder to say, but it, kind of sounds better. But, paranormal is so ubiquitous. But is that even feasible? Because the person supposedly no longer has a voice, no longer has volition. Their life is gone. But maybe something remains. Maybe they've made some kind of impression. Maybe they want to reach out. Maybe they can't move on to whatever reality, whatever destiny awaits them until their issue is addressed. So what do you think? What bears that out?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
That's a hard question for me to answer. When it comes to the paranormal, I am so out of the loop. But I do know, working with Amy, that she's always talked about people being in their death state and the unresolved issues, and that's why they can't move on. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with murder victims. Christ, I wish I had some murder victims come through from the other side to tell me, who did it. It helped me out on a lot of cases I had. But, it's got to be frustrating if you're on the other side and you're trying to tell somebody what happened to you and nobody's listening. I hope to God that's not the case where people are, frustrated and they're where they're supposed to be. I don't know. Anything's possible. I never say no to anything, especially when it comes to the afterlife. Nobody's ever came back and told us what's going on over there.
It's definitely a great, honest answer, and I think one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on tonight with this topic is your realistic approach. Some would say that you have, like you said to us earlier, that you didn't believe in the paranormal, which is very nonsense, especially in your opinion. But one of the interesting things is you believe you haven't experienced the paranormal. Is that correct?
I've never experienced anything, or at least I don't think I have.
Which is fascinating in itself. You were, I could be wrong on this number, but you were in the law enforcement for 21 years, correct?
Yeah, over 21, almost 22, yeah.
And how long of those were you a homicide detective?
Like 13.
And see, that's interesting to me. You were around murder, you were around homicide and many different situations, and you never experienced something paranormal. I know people that are EMTs that maybe are, I don't say this to be mean, but gullible, maybe more impressionable to the paranormal, and they experience something being around it. So
right.
22 years, as you said, you never experienced anything. That's fascinating to me. Is it approach? Is it something that is in your gut feeling that you don't need to know the answer? Do you think there is a certain reason you
or maybe just attending to the business at hand?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I think a lot of it is, and this is my humble opinion when it comes to the paranormal, that you're either gonna have an experience or you're not. You're not one of those people that, I think you're born where, you know, you're always gonna sense something, you know, and that's always gonna happen. If you're in a place that has activity, good chance if you had experiences before, you're gonna have it again. You know, I'm pretty much convinced I shut off at an early age, like Amy talks about. I don't look for it. I don't relish in it. I mean, I look at, even on the show, like people are like, oh, aren't you spooked out? I'm like, no, I'm there to do a job. To me, it's a crime scene. And that's how I approach it. You know, the victim isn't dead in this case, but the victims are alive, but the perpetrator is the paranormal. And trying to solve that case is, you know, basically what I do with Amy. You know, she's one of my tools. She's a tool, like I use experts or I use historians. You know, it's all part of the whole thing. But as far as, I just think people either have experiences or they don't. You know, I could maybe have an experience and just don't realize it's an experience. You know, I was in my house when I first bought it, and a light switch went off. It went on in my foyer going from my master bedroom into my bathroom. I'm like, son of a bitch, what the hell just happened? But sure enough, I did debunk it and figured out it had a faulty switch that if you walked past it, the toggle would fall. So it wasn't some great mystery. I wasn't having demons attack me in my house. It was just a faulty light switch. And I think a lot of people, like, everything's you know, oh shit, the light went out. Well, you got a bad bulb. Replace the fucking thing, and then that'll be it. No, not everything's the goddamn Exorcist.
Exactly.
And we truly agree, you know, even though I think we, especially specifically us, you know, not to make it about us, but in the same realm of what you do as a former detective, a private investigator, and somebody that works with the medium to try to help victims that believe they're experiencing things. As demonologists, we get a bad rap all the time.
Well, it's just the connotation of demonologist. It starts with demon.
Yeah.
So, you know,
people don't understand. We work with psychotherapists, you know, we work with physicians, psychologists. We try to, at least most of us try to know what's going on. We try to understand the natural before we even jump to the conclusions of there being
supernatural or paranormal.
Yeah. Because we truly do believe 90% of it is natural, if not more. So we try to take the victim that is in that reality of there's something paranormal, and we try to adhere and take away from it because we want to make sure that there's nothing going wrong. First, naturally.
I'm glad you guys are like that because, you know, I've heard horror stories from talking to clients, and we don't usually air it talking about, you know, paranormal teams coming in to do their thing. But, you know, a lot of these people that go in that are basically amateurs do it to get their own rocks off, number one. And as far as they're concerned, every friggin' thing that's going on in the house is a ghost or a demon or whatever they come up with. So I think what happens with that, it gives people like you in your field a bad rap. Because now everybody's, you know, well, this guy was an idiot. This whole team made things worse, or they didn't tell me anything, or they believed everything I said, and how come you don't, you know? So it's kind of strange how people think all paranormal investigators are experts when they're not. Which is sad because, you know, when you're wrong with your heart, you go to a heart doctor, right? Something's wrong.
Yeah,
definitely.
You don't go to a fucking plumber. Right? You got to go to the right person. Like, if I got a problem with demons, I'm going to call you guys, right? So,
well, we can certainly talk about it, if not make much sense about it, you know, in the long run. But, you know, we find people self-diagnosed too. The clients or the group that has been, usually we are referred from a, you know, more established paranormal group, and they'll call, oh, this is beyond us. We got to call in the demon guys. And people have self-diagnosed. They would be very disappointed if we said, well, we think it's a lot of a psychological projection and all that. And even then, we can't make an exact diagnosis, but people have self-diagnosed.
Well,
now, yeah, with Dead Files, what I see is a dichotomy there. You seem to be the objective researcher, whereas Amy is, the subjective one. She's going to receive impressions and interpret them, which is her gift and talent. Whereas you take, the pragmatic approach, and it's all object. What do we see here? What can we analyze? What substance do we have? That we really unravel. So, but somehow it works together. It's kind of like mixing oil and water, but it does make a good.
Well, I agree 100%. I mean, I don't always agree with her perception of what she sees. When, because I just, we had a big argument over the Villisca axe murders. I mean, that was her perception of what, and I went with my 22 years of experience doing homicides, and she's bringing her spiritual perception to it, and we disagreed on what happened. And we agreed to disagree.
Yes.
No big deal. But just because somebody has a perception of something doesn't mean it's right. Just because I Google something on the internet, trust me, I know this for a fact, doesn't mean it's fucking right at all. So it's a matter of where that information comes from. I have this argument with clients all the time. They'll be like, well, I found it on the internet. All right, well, what was the source?
Now, what?
No, you're not listening to me. What was the source that the internet got it from? Was it a university? Was it, what's the source? Yeah. The internet. Okay, I'm done talking to you because you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about. People think this because it's on the internet. According to the internet, I'm married to fucking Morgan Fairchild, and
oh darn, the things we find out. That's one more bubble burst.
I didn't tell my girlfriend. She has no idea I'm still married to her, so I don't know. I mean,
you're still right. You're so right about the internet. My friend found her little girls were doing some homework and found dirty words on Wikipedia. And she called me up and she's like, what can I do about this? I became a Wikipedia expert and went in and took off the dirty words. So, I mean, I could have done their math homework incorrectly for them and they would have looked it up and said, that's the answer. I found it on the internet.
Right. And that's the problem with today's society. Nobody takes the time to actually really look for information.
Do your own research, go beyond what the internet. But the internet may be a resource, but not a source. You got to dig into that.
Well, people laugh because I use microfilm. I still look at microfiche, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? It's stuff on that stuff you're not going to find on the internet. So
yes, very much.
People don't get the whole. And it's our society. It's our fault because we, the Google is the say all, and that's it. I have this argument with my friends all the time. I sit there, I'm like, who was that guy's name? Hold on a second, I'll look it up. How about you use your fucking brain for 10 minutes and let's try to remember it instead of, maybe the Google's not right today. But that's a society issue we have today. So, it is what it is.
No, definitely. And I think with a lot of the paranormal, unfortunately, where people jump to that conclusion is sometimes it's the easier solution to jump to instead of researching the technical things. Like I'm a deacon with the United States Old Catholic Church. I am clergy, but I do have a career. My career is I'm an HVAC foreman. I've been dealing with air for 8 years. And the locations I go in, I see black spores like black mold and ductwork, the unclean nature. I'm doing a hospital. I posted a photo of a hospital with supply air with sediment built in it. And mind you, that's a hospital. You're breathing that in. These things can, of course,
and what can you do? Yeah, you can get all kinds of sensations,
hallucinations. But the thing is, though, is something that kind of connects to Carl's main point and main topic of the question is people that were murderers, like Al Capone. He believed he was haunted by his victims. But is it more so the reality that he had syphilis?
Was it syphilis? That was
I was going to say. I was about to say the guy had syphilis his last 5-6 years.
We got to think. Putting Capone in context, he rose to power. His greatest ascent to power in Chicago was when he was 26 years of age. So he was already established. But we're wondering. Of course, he had a strict Catholic upbringing too. So we're wondering, did he have some kind of conscience issue? It was a rudimentary suppressed conscience. But then again, he had contracted syphilis probably when he was in his mid-20s. So that is a slow and progressive disease. But did that throw all kinds of things into his psychic mechanism? And so he's in his cell, and he feels that one of it was I don't recall the name, but a friend of his that he had axed, fell out of favor with him, was somebody Rudy, so it was coming back to haunt him in his cell in Eastern State Penitentiary. And he would be screaming at night, say, it's after me, no, I'm sorry, Rudy. And So what's going on with him? I mean, we can't know. We don't have his experience, but it's easy to jump to the conclusion that his murder was haunting him. But I think that was in Capone's mind.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was fishing in his pool the last couple of years of his life. So
Yes,
although I'd probably catch more fish in my fucking pool than I would.
But being a homicide detective for 13 years, did you ever come across people like perpetrators that were so disconnected from reality that something told them to do it, or there was ghosts involved? Did you ever come across that as a police officer?
You're talking hundreds and thousands of murders I've investigated that. I don't recall ever anybody blaming the paranormal for doing what they did. But I did have a lot of sociopaths and psychos that did, I had a guy that did a double homicide. He actually did a triple homicide of 2 elderly people and another guy downstairs the same night. And he kept blaming this guy Davis did it. He didn't do it. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And so we run in his name 7 ways from Sunday to see if there was a Davis associated with him somehow. And sure enough, the cop comes up to me. He's vouching the gun they recovered from him. And bad me, I should have looked at it ahead of time. But, when you're in the throes of doing an interrogation, you're not really worried about. I was more worried about the gun we recovered matched, the victims, the ballistics that we're going to recover from the victims. And sure as shit, it was a Davis firearm.
Davis did it.
Yeah, so he kept saying Davis did it. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. But, in his fucking head, though, going back to in his head, he believed that the gun committed these murders. He didn't. And I don't want to get into the crime scene because it was pretty brutal. And the stuff he did to the old lady was, I don't want to get into it, but it was pretty immoral in my, what he did. And he was a nut, obviously. He was out of his mind. But in his head, Davis was the one who did the murders. I was there, but I didn't do it.
Wow.
As far as him blaming the paranormal, there's a fine line between people that have mental issues and people who will blame the paranormal for everything. I mean, the DeFeo case in Amityville is the biggest, biggest thing of people saying that the devil made him do it, type of thing. I've never come across a case like that, but it would be interesting line of questioning I would follow if that was if I did get somebody say a ghost did it or I was possessed and that's why. But you gotta understand something. I worked a lot of ghettos, so a lot of it was street crime. It was street murders. It wasn't the small town spooky type murders. It was all violent street stuff I was dealing with for all those years.
Well, that's still interesting because like MS-13 and other gangs are known to have satanic connections. Like they do satanic rituals.
It's part of their motif sometimes, and it inflates them and gives them gives them that zeitgeist. We're in league with the devil. We're champions of Lucifer or whatever.
Right. Well, I'd come across a couple of Santeria cases where we had homicides where there was a Santeria altar set up. The whole 9 yards with the dead chickens. We didn't know what the hell it was. And one had a goat. I forget, it was somewhere in Brooklyn, but one had a goat. And there was another place that had a couple of chickens upside down, bleeding out. And it's just like, what the fuck is this? It's all right. You murdered the guy. We got you. And what's with the altar? I just didn't, because I'm thinking street, Did you really? You killed the guy, and we know it was over money, and a bad drug deal that went bad. What's with the Santeria? So I don't know if that was just trying to absolve themselves of the murder, saying that it was justified. So we're going to put this little altar up. I don't know. That's probably more you guys can answer that.
Yeah. Well, they get into disassociation where the onus is on them. It's really too much for the human psyche to deal with unless they're truly cold-blooded and totally, sociopathic. They projecting that guilt onto the paranormal. The devil is powerful. The devil directs me. All of a sudden they're off the hook, and in that sense, they have life imprisonment or whatever awaits them, but they're off the hook as far as their soul goes because the devil made them do it. And that's, like time immemorial. This goes back to the satanic forces made me do it, But we find that even a smaller league where people, their lives are in disarray, or they can't manage their household, their children are all, kaflooey, and they have all these internal problems. But sometimes the paranormal is just a symptom,
Right.
Like I had a case, I was case manager, I addressed in Brooklyn, New York, 3-story brownstone house. And, as we got to know these people, they had genuine paranormal activity. They had things moving around, crucifix, the pendant pulled off the lady, and objects moving around. You hear like what sounded like people moving around in the kitchen at night, and you go in there and turn on the light, nobody's in there. However, I had to tell the lady of the house, I said, from what you told me about your case history, your house's history and your family, the paranormal is symptomatic of what's going on. It's a projection. It's the house is giving you an expression of what's happened, but really, that's not your chief issue here. And in fact, and that was a very rare case where a missing person, I wouldn't say she was so much identified as her name came out. We were recording, had, the audio recorder going. And when we play it back, we hear very distinctly, we're downstairs looking at a well, which we never got into really. And I was a member of TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society at the time, and this is my case. And we're recording, and one of our recorders picked up the name Beatrice. Very clear, Beatrice. So there's the homeowner and her cousin, who had lived in the house for a time. Her cousin went to her mother and said, "Do we know anybody named Beatrice?" And the mother became very agitated. Said, "Who's been talking to you? How do you know that name?" Well, to cut to the chase, the story, what happened was Beatrice was the name of the homeowner's grandfather's mistress who went disappearing. She was a missing person. Last seen in that house, and this was on police files, which we researched. She was last seen in that house, that brownstone house, and her name was Beatrice, and she was last seen there. And that is what was evinced on the audio recording. I'm not saying it solved the case, but it was just fascinating that that's how it came out. These people were sincere. They'd never heard the name Beatrice before.
That's pretty cool, though.
It was an anomaly, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a deep question, even though they get a spurt of it on the dead files, because of course everybody thinks.
Didn't he say he was going to talk about the dead files? No, it's okay.
But I think when people watch television, Carl's been on television, Steve, been on television. I've done some consultation work in the background. It's not my thing. Of course, I have a little bit more.
Elisa's been on television, but we can't talk about that yet.
She has, and has been titled.
It hasn't been released yet, but it's coming out.
But so in that same token, though, is we go through a rigorous interview process, deciphering process of what could be going on. Sometimes our cases could take months, years, because, like I said, we don't want to jump to that conclusion that they're dealing with something paranormal, because if we do that, we're doing injustice to these people.
Right.
So,
it may comfort them, but it's not real.
But still, we're lying to them. But in that same token, Steve, what are some of the things that, of course, aren't on the show? What are the processes you do? What are some of the specific questions you may ask that that person's lying to you? Some technique, maybe.
Well, I have a process. So what you do is, and I love people saying, well, if they look down and to the left, they're lying. I mean, it's all bullshit. Everybody has their own tells.
Yeah.
You got to find out what their tell is. What you got to do is talk with somebody first and ask them questions they're going to answer truthfully.
What have you done?
Watch their demeanor when they're answering questions truthfully, and then slip in a question they may not answer truthfully in there. See how they react, and then go back to some truthful questions they're going to answer. There's no reason to lie to, and work your way back and forth like that. You'll pick up on it, and you'll see that if something changes. It could be anything. It could be a foot tapping. It could be, the proverbial looking down to the left. I love these experts with their fucking books out there to tell you this is how you know if somebody's lying. You know what? A bullshit meter is something you got to really learn how to do, and I'm an expert at it. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I've been doing this shit a lot of years. So when it comes to interrogate, and I'm not talking about people that did something wrong. I'm talking about witnesses as well, who aren't willing to answer questions truthfully because they don't want to get involved. And that's like I don't do interrogations on TV, obviously, because nobody would call into the show. I do interviews, but my interviews are based on, let me try to ask you some questions I know you're not going to lie to, and then see where it goes from there. And I'll call bullshit when I see it. A lot of times it gets edited from the show, but a lot more than not. A lot more than yes, that it's in the show. But listen, I'm not going to hide who I am. I don't give a shit if the cameras are rolling. I'm going to do what I do. And, if they don't like it, too bad. You called me in to do a job and I'm calling bullshit on something. But that's what I do. It's a simple thing. What you got to do is get good at it. You got to practice at it, because it's hard to pick up on, because you get sociopathic people that can lie. They'll tell you that I'm Jesus Christ, and there'll be no difference in the way they answer questions. Those people you cannot crack because they're psychotic. But the regular layman on the street, regular person like you and I, and you can get those little physical things that they do, and you'll be like, okay, let me ask him some more, and then hit him with another, or her even, and then hit him with another question they may lie to, and just see what happens, But it takes experience. It's not something you can develop overnight.
Is there a situation, not to hog the questions here, but of course, specifically why I asked this is because one of the things Carl and I look at is when a client emails us and saying, I have a demon in my house. Well,
we have
how for one of the questions is, of course, how do you jump to this conclusion? And one of the other things that we hear too, which is a huge red flag for us, I am possessed by a demon. Yeah. Well, anytime that, if you really look at the true literature of demonology and, of course, the church, is the fact that the possessed individual doesn't know that they are possessed. So when you come out and say, I'm possessed, we kind of automatically know, especially if you self-diagnose, that there is probably something psychotic with them, right, something psychologically wrong with them, because they wouldn't truly know. So that's something that we look at. Is there a case that you worked on either for the Dead Files or being a detective that you instantly knew they were bullshit? Like you instantly felt,
or had a sense of it anyway,
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't really get into details, but there have been a couple of episodes I've done where I knew there was a couple of things that were total bullshit and fabricated, and I can't get into it, but I knew it because, well, I'll give you one, for instance. A woman, and nobody will figure out what episode it is. Woman's telling me, oh, I saw this thing in the hallway hanging down like a gremlin. And I'm making that up because I'm just to try to throw people off.
Yeah, right.
And so, being a detective, I asked, okay, oh, wow, that's, what side of the bed do you sleep on? Oh, on this side. Well, how in the fuck can you see that from that side of the bed, if that's the side you sleep on? I can't see it. You got vision that goes through the wall, or what's going on here? Well, that night, I slept on my husband's side. Oh, so just one night you guys switched. I was married 26 years. We stayed on the same fucking side the entire time we were married. I still to this day don't move out of the spot I sleep on. Even I go to a hotel, I'm right on the side I sleep on. So, she's, well, I'm like, listen, just, you're making this shit up, or did somebody tell you that they saw it, or, what's the story? Well, I don't, forget, I caught you in a lie. Stop the bullshit. That kind of stuff pisses me off, because I'm not here to entertain you or listen to your games. Don't fabricate shit. We vet you enough that we think there's something going on here, to the point where we're coming in, but don't embellish, and that's where I have my issues.
So Carl, do you have, before I get to that question, do you have a specific case that, because I'll definitely go over one for the listeners. Do you have a specific case that you knew instantly was bullshit?
Oh, that I knew. There was a married couple. They were residing in a house that it was a converted church that had been turned into a house and all that. And they so wanted the GH crew to come there and tell them their house was haunted. We really didn't find any evidence, which is all fine and good. With there, we're not saying you don't have haunted activity. We're just not finding it this weekend, But they were so insistent. This is where the ghost. They were telling us the whole scenario. This is where she walks across, and this is where things move. But we didn't see anything that weekend. So but they had called. Then we found out they'd called multiple groups in, and it was all the same. We contacted people. It was all the same scenario. So they genuinely want, and I said that on the air. I said, maybe it's not so much that their house is haunted as they want it to be, and they won't settle for anything else.
Yeah, and they want to be in the forefront. They want to be,
they've got
15 minutes.
Television cameras there, so
yeah,
that's good to.
And that with our show, that's why we vet so well. It takes us sometimes 6 months before we pull the trigger on a case.
Mm.
The vetting, I'm very anal about it. If they've had in the past been arrested for larceny, deception, that type of thing, that tells you something about their character.
Mm-hmm. This character profile, right?
Insurance fraud type things, stuff that people don't think to look at. I don't give a fuck if you're telling me there's a demon in your bedroom. I want to know if you arrested for fraud or something where you're not the truthful type of person to begin with. Mm-hmm. And we've caught quite a few that we've just we're not doing this case. Mm. Or you'll get somebody that's rational 1 minute, next thing you know, you're getting a phone call and they're drunk out of their mind. Get your asses over here. I need help. I got demons. You got demons, all right? They're in a fucking bottle.
Uncork those demons. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for me, it's mostly been catching them in a lie beforehand, as opposed to once we get out there. And that's why we take so long to vet. And I got to give our producers credit because, I have a certain line of questioning I want, for the intake people.
Yeah.
That I want specific questions answered. And if they can't answer them, just tell them goodbye. We can't help you. So, I don't put that out in the public because then people call, they're going to know what those specific questions are. And we just keep it, we got a good team of people that are motivated to get the right people to help. Mm. Do most of our clients, is all the shit they're going through paranormal? No, 100% not. People tell me, oh, we're fighting all the time. We never did before. Bullshit. You're a married couple. You're married 15 years. All of a sudden, that's what happens. All of a sudden, you hate each other. You don't like the way she puts her toothpaste on the countertop, and that irritates you.
Yeah,
you guys are falling out of love. I hate to upset you. So they blame everything on the paranormal.
I know. Oh, I found that time and time again. But one thing I've noted, a common denominator with dead files is that all the clients, all the supplicants, they all seem distressed. They're not just like, oh, yeah, I'd like to know about my haunting. There's always something. They're very agitated, very afraid. They feel threatened. They all are right up there with it.
Yeah, I mean, we get a ton of requests. I mean, we have thousands of requests, and people are like, oh, we have nice ghosts, but we just want to know who they are, and they're friendly, and we don't have a problem. Why the fuck would we come there? I mean, got people out there saying they're being thrown down flights of stairs, or they're waking up with scratches, stuff like that, or there's kids being terrorized, and that's a big thing with me, with kids and the elderly or anybody, handicapped. So we look at those first. I'm not going to come to your house when we do only 13 episodes a season because you just want to find out who's haunting your house, but they're friendly. And they get upset. So we only take serious case, what we think is a serious case.
Right.
And obviously the network has to approve it. We've had a couple cases where the network wouldn't approve it, but it's rare. But, our cases over the seasons, I mean, you can look at season 1 and season 2. We would never investigate those cases today that we did back in season 1 and season 2.
The show was developing. You were learning
right.
what was working and what wasn't.
Right. We got several thousand requests, and, to filter through that, we had a guy one time said his penis was haunted, so... Yeah. I got on the phone with him just to have a few laughs. I was actually in LA and at the office, and I was trying to teach these young kids how to break balls when the guy's a nut, but he's trying to be a smart ass with you.
Yeah.
So I had this guy going for probably 40 minutes straight, and I was asking him all kinds of questions. And I'm like, at the end, I fucking yelled at him. I said, "That's it. We're coming over there. We're cutting your penis off. We're going to show you." So it was just
extreme unction. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's trying to make a mockery of the whole show and everything.
I know.
He was pissing me off. But I said, "All right, get him on
the
the phone."
was too smart for you, I guess.
Yeah. So I said, "Get him on the phone. I'll talk to this guy," because they didn't know what to do with him. He kept calling and calling and calling. I'm like, well, first of all, we shouldn't have your numbers. Everything should be done through a website and emails, But it was pretty funny, And that was 10 years ago. So we, it's now I don't even take the phone calls.
Yeah, right. Could you imagine how, especially
what it is,
20 seasons now, right?
Yeah, we're in season 13. So
13.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 30. Yeah, we're at the 200 episode mark. We either passed it or we're at it, something like that. I think we passed it.
We'll come and celebrate with you when you figure out which day it is.
It's funny. We lost after 150. Like we hit that 150 mark, but 100, and then we hit 150. After that, it just kind of blended in, and we'd really have to sit down and take a look at the numbers, find out exactly which one it was our 200th episode, or if it's coming up in this season.
Let's say in 10 years, has your view of I don't even like the word. I try to avoid paranormal, but it's ubiquitous. You can't get away from it. Has your view or your opinion of ghosts or your conception of the paranormal, has that altered significantly in the last 10 years? You go back 10 years, what would you think of like hauntings and all, and paranormal manifestations as opposed to then and now?
It's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't say it changed drastically. My perception of what happens to you after you die has changed.
Really?
Yeah. So now I was raised Roman Catholic, right?
Yes.
You're fucked up, you go to hell. If you're not so fucked up, you go to purgatory for a couple of years, and then you go to heaven. It was that simple, right? That's how I was, And when I was growing up, it was like, "Hey, I think I see a ghost." Shut the fuck up and go to bed. That's how I grew up.
Well, I'd love to hear that confession box when you were in there, like in catechism and all that. Wow. Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I always thought that if you were a ghost and you stuck around, because you had nothing better to do. You didn't feel like going to the light, or you weaseled your way out of hell, or something happened. But when Amy starts talking about death states and somebody reliving their death and shit like that, I'm like, I hope this shit is not true, but it's hard to not think it's true because I know of her abilities. It's hard to argue because of her abilities. It's hard for me to ever second guess what she's saying.
Right, and there is some suggestion that the deceased do replay their tragic moments as if they're trying to make sense of it. I don't think they have a choice in it, really.
Right.
I think it's just how the phenomenon manifests. But they do seem to relive that over and over, and sometimes they get it through as if they're trying to convey that to somebody living.
Right. See, I still can't wrap my head around, like, I'm a ghost. Why the fuck am I haunting this place? Why don't I go someplace like, I don't know, the Bahamas or, the French Riviera? What the fuck am I doing here? If I was a ghost, the last place I would be is in my house. I'd be someplace chilling, So that always amazes me.
I can't. Why you ask a question?
I think I'm lost, dude. It's so true, though. I do understand a little bit of the complexity of why we can't go to certain places, but it's the same token. I would go to like Tahiti or something like that, friggin' somewhere in Tahiti.
Go gone there. Let's have at least ask a question. No, I gotta recover.
French Polynesia out there.
I know you're excited to have him on tonight. I definitely know you have something, especially with your background.
Well, I will ask a question that you might have noticed. I disappeared for a little while. My camera cut out. I put my tablet on, so I seem to be back online.
Okay.
We do have a question from one of our viewers who asked, what case sticks with you the most from the Dead Files?
That's a tough question. Alcatraz was always one of my favorites. The Santa Fe prison was one of my favorites. As far as sticking with me, there was a case in Brown Summit, Georgia. and the family had a special needs daughter. That one always stuck with me because it was heartbreaking. I mean, she I don't know how many surgeries she had, and all she wanted was the ghost to leave her family alone and take her and leave them alone. And this girl couldn't even comprehend really a lot, but she knew enough to think, let me save my family. So that one always stuck with me. As far as anything else, that's about it. You know, it's locations that kind of I remember most, you know, and the reason I remember Alcatraz is a place I always wanted to visit, but I wasn't going to go. I'd rather go to the Bahamas, like we were talking about. So that was cool. The Lizzie Borden one was, you know, fucking house. It's a homicide. She did it, as far as I'm concerned, and that's it. Case closed. You know.
That could have been another one of our viewers' questions. What do you think about Lizzie Borden? Did she do it?
Oh, 100%. 100%. They fucked up that crime scene so bad. It was a joke. I mean, it was an absolute joke. I don't want to get into it, but it just drove me crazy that people are very passionate. I mean, you guys know you're up there, but people are very passionate on both sides of that.
Yes.
People that think she's innocent, man, you can't talk to them. You know, you really cannot talk to them. You know, they're worse than liberals and conservatives. I mean, you can't. You know, they're even worse. You can't talk to them whatsoever.
Yeah, the scariest part of that house is the neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I know the food in the neighborhood.
Yeah, too early one day, and that wasn't good.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to Lizzie Borden, we were trying to do at that time. We did 2 special episodes. One was Alcatraz, and we did Lizzie Borden. We were trying to do the theater where Lincoln was shot. And then we were trying to do the Amityville house, and we got turned down by both of them. So it was fine. I would have liked to have done the Amityville house just to get into prison to talk to DeFeo. You know, if I could have got that, would have been like, now it's my chance to talk to this guy. Like, I talked to a guy in prison that did a murder in the first season, and when I saw how much they edited it and the way they did, I'm like, fuck you. I'm never talking to a guy in prison again, because you obviously don't know what we do. You know, they just cut it to the point where I was like a fucking traveling salesman. Oh, you murdered this person. You know, they made it very vanilla. And I got into this guy's face. I mean, I really got into it with him. And they just butchered it. I mean, obviously it was season 1. So they asked me,
they had to be a little cautious, they felt.
Yeah, and you know what? I said, I'm never doing that again. You know, I'm not going to waste my time to get permission to go into a prison to talk to somebody, and you're just going to butcher it. So,
do you think that would be different though, that you're so far in?
You know, the showrunners we have now and the producers, I think it would be a lot different. I mean, people halfway through these last 10 years, they've realized I'm a hugger. I'm Italian, right? I'm a hugger. I've been hugging people that were crying since the beginning. But they thought it was they wanted me to be a certain, you know,
removed.
Yeah, you're the homicide detective.
Yeah, black, white, black, but I can't have any compassion for people. I'm like, that's not how it works. You know, somebody's crying, you fucking hug them, you know. And then all of a sudden they started saying, one of the producers, like, we should start showing this because, and next thing you know, it's like, oh, we just love it when you hug somebody. It just shows your empathy. When did you start becoming empathetic? I'm like, son of a bitch. I've been empathetic for 10 fucking years in my whole life, actually. And now all of a sudden you're like, when did you start becoming empathetic? I swear to God, I want to kill somebody when I hear that.
Mr. Planet R, Steve, please. That's what we're here for. You know, we will embrace you. I give you a virtual hug now.
When I become empathetic,
No pleasing some people.
No. And yet, like we were talking about earlier on, it's like people like, oh, now you believe in ghosts because you work with Amy. I'm like, no, I never said that. No. You know, I never said I didn't believe in the paranormal. I don't believe you. You know, the living is who I don't trust or don't believe in.
Yeah.
I digress. I went on a little rant there.
Okay. Well, this is the show for rants. We're here to rant and rave and diatribe and all kinds.
So, with your time of being investigator for or investigator for the dead files, of course, a private investigator and a detective and a police officer. There had to be so many things that you've put your eyes on. And one of the craziest things that we talk about are demons. And of course, the question I have to ask, because this is Duo Daemonologie, I know it's not your wheelhouse, but what's your take on demons? Do you think they could exist? Do you think it's just something that people make up, part of dualism, good and evil? What's your take on demons? I'd like to know, because
it's a good question. I've never been asked that question. It doesn't come up that often. In the 200 episodes we've, whatever the number is, almost 200 or over 200 episodes, it hasn't come up often. And Amy's the first one to say possession is very, very rare.
As we
so of course I listen to what she has to say because it's not my wheelhouse, like we were saying. But I take it all in. I listen to everything and remember everything. And my girlfriend will definitely tell you that's the case. She gets mad at that I can remember stuff that I was like, how do you know? How do you remember that? I just, But for me, it's I want to hope. I hope there's no such thing as a demon, but I've seen some vile shit that human beings can do, and in my head, there's no way in hell that a person with a soul could do that. So there is evil out here somewhere. There's definitely evil influencing people. Whether maybe they're born that way, which is probably what I think most, but there is evil out here. I mean, if you've seen the crap that I've seen, to think that there's no evil is what the form of the evil is where I have my up in the air if it's a demon or if it's, and I don't, and I don't even think Amy likes to use that word. She likes to say it was never human.
Right.
So that's what I kind of lean towards. Not so much that there was demons out there, but that there's something out there that was never human that's messing around with people and messing with our life.
I think just to make sense of it, to grasp that concept of the extent or the boundless evil that can be extant in human nature, I think people need that personification.
Yeah.
What is this? This is mysterious. How can a human being do that to another human being? It's, demonic. It gives it a personification. It gives it substance.
Well, I mean, Hollywood doesn't help, but all that bullshit they put out.
Yeah.
It's some of the stuff I'm like, really, like I can't watch a cop show, like a movie, because it just drives me insane with the inconsistencies. And I mean, from your background, that I'm like, really, this is, and I'm like, I can't watch this. Like the FBI comes in and takes over a case. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I don't think the FBI comes in and takes over my case. I'm like, stuff I see. So it's just, Hollywood has a lot to do with, I think, people's perception.
Right.
What's going on.
Well, it keeps people that wrong. It defines it, like we didn't, The Exorcist really quantified what a demon is now. I mean, our modern conception of demon, it took that novel and that motion picture, to make us more aware of possession and all that. And it was predicated upon a real case, but it doesn't happen very often. And whenever, I think James will concur, whenever I've come into a demonic case, there's always some seriously unresolved conflict, some imbalance, some
with
trauma.
The person. Yeah.
In the person from which it originates, and it's always with the person. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people move into a home and it just doesn't feel right. But as far as it's something you call outright demonic, there's always something in their background, something that was not uncovered, was not properly uncovered. It's been suppressed, and this is how it's manifested. Oh, it's genuine.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That there's underlying factors and underlying demons, for lack of a better word, in people's lives that contribute a lot to the paranormal side of things, especially like the poltergeist stuff. I never knew a poltergeist wasn't like the movie. Amy says it's people created. Yep. So I didn't know that. I'm going by the goddamn movie, right?
Yeah.
So the first time she told me that a poltergeist is created by a living agent, I'm like, well, that's not the movie I saw. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. What are we talking about here? Because I'm all screwed up now. I don't know how you guys feel about poltergeist, but that's what she says. And, so.
Yeah, I was involved in a genuine poltergeist. I mean, several, but one was really pronounced. This was 100% bona fide poltergeist activity. We were there the first night. it was one of those rare instances where things were happening right while the investigative team was there, and I was called in as the demonologist. And crockery was flying around, hitting walls, hitting a post, following people, floating and following people. I had a dinner plate appear over my head and smash on the floor in front of me. I was holding a remote thermal gauge, and a kitchen knife, and it turned out it wasn't even the homeowner's knife. A knife came down the hallway. I turned and saw this. It wasn't spinning. It just came down and hit not my hand, but the instrument I was holding. My chair with me in it went back against the wall. Now, the history of these people, the lady was born in like the Azores, and he was Latin, Guatemala, came from. And they had 7 children at the time, then had another one. They would constantly fight and then have make-up sex. And there was the lady of the house. She and her sister had 10 Ouija boards. 3 of them they lost. 3 of them they burned. The rest were lost. They had this chaotic history and all that. It's like, woo, this is, the spirits are just dancing around there. And they would appear as 2 people. Well, the man was truly demonic looking. I actually saw him once, and so this was like we never were able to resolve it. We didn't come in and save these people. Right. They were driven out of their house, but what a fascinating time that was. Fascinating case. I think the high point was when we were recording in there, and one of the investigators, I said, ask if it misses her, Tina, I'll call her. Ask if the spirit misses Tina, because they were out of the house and the children were with, the aunts and uncles. And so she says, do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home? So I'm listening to this audio recording, and almost 90 minutes of it, when I hear this sibilant whisper. And, oh, wow, I got something. Play it back, and we augmented it. What it says is, she says, do you like Tina? Do you want Tina home? And this male voice says, oh, yeah, I'd like to boil Tina. Now imagine our thrill when we're playing this for the client. You want some? This is our reveal. This is what we got.
Yeah.
One of our investigators was cleaning a bird cage. She had 2 lovebirds, and this lady kept exotic birds, so she knew how to care for them. So this investigator, she's scraping the cage, and she says to the 2 lovebirds, "How you doing, babies?" We play back the recording because we're recording everything. A female voice says, "Dying." Now, how you doing, babies? Dying. Within less than 2 weeks, both of those birds had died.
Really?
Contracted something, they just died. So all kinds of chaotic stuff happening there. But you look at, it was a battery. I'd almost be surprised if stuff wasn't happening. But they had they were spiritually inclined people. So that's how this projected. It became a poltergeist.
Yeah.
Right. The house was only not quite 20 years old. So it couldn't have happened with the history of the house, I don't think so. But it was fascinating to see things flying around, appearing over my head.
Yeah. Well, you never grew up in my house then.
They were flying around in your house?
Oh, yes. My mother was deadly with a wooden spoon at 20 paces. Had her shoes.
Maybe there was some unresolved conflict.
Yeah. Unresolved is right. She had some issues, my mother. And both of them did.
I definitely think poltergeists are more the norm than the demons or ghosts. I think we give our perception and we create that perception. Most poltergeists happen with children. So I feel like in the realm, if there's a physical tantrum, there could be a possibility of a physical tantrum, like a psychic tantrum. Like instead of throwing the cup, maybe they're using their perception, their mind, which telekinesis is psychokinesis.
Well, like that movie Carrie, right?
Yeah.
And caterpillar flying across and hitting them in the chest.
But I think that's what we deal with more. I think that's what we deal with more than any of those other things. If it's natural occurrences like shared hallucinations and stuff like that. I think poltergeists tend to be generally more thing that affects people.
Yeah. I mean, I listen to what Amy talks about. Yeah. I don't. People think I get it like now I'm studying the paranormal. Trust me, when I'm done with my investigation, I work with her to try to figure out what was going on. I'm done. I ain't going ghost hunting. I'm not doing anything. I'm not looking up books on poltergeists or anything like that. It's not what I do. So people are like, can you help me? I'm like, no, it's not what I do. You're not getting what I do. You've been watching the show for how long? You don't understand I don't do that?
Have you ever attempted it? Have you ever attempted it?
Attempted what?
Attempted ghost hunting. Have you ever dabbled in it?
I was up at the. I didn't ghost hunt. I was with a couple of. I was in. Where the hell were we? in Lake George.
Great.
And I was up there. I've only been to 3 conventions, and that was the one, and that was years ago. I was still living in New York, and we were at this fort, and I was hanging out with a couple of people that do ghost hunting. Fort
William Henry, I believe it is. Yep.
Yes, that was it. And I had a flask with me, so I wasn't really looking to. I was taking a shot every time they were calling out to the demons or whatever the fuck was going on there. I just, I'm like, really? To me, ghost hunting is like being on surveillance, and I hated fucking surveillance with a passion. Sitting around for hours waiting for some shit to happen. Oh, thank you. You could keep that. I did that shit for years. I want nothing to do with that anymore. No, I went to the Ocala. Was it Ocala? The Seven Sisters Inn.
Yeah, my brother used to live out there.
Right. So I went to, and they invited me to this convention thing. That was like the second one I did. And they put me in the most haunted room. I slept like a baby. I was fine. They were like, oh, when I woke up the next morning, I came down, John Zaffis is sitting there, and he's like looking at me. How you doing? Good. Everybody else is kind of like, Johnny's like, he's the first one to like, nah, don't show me any dust, orbs or anything. But people looking at me like, how was your night? I'm like, fine. How was yours? Everybody's waiting. Well, did anything happen? That's the most haunted room in the place. I'm like, not so much. maybe not on Wednesday nights or Friday night, whatever night it was.
Yeah, well, a lot of places are touted. Even in Rhode Island, there are 2 places that are touted as the most haunted place in Rhode Island, probably the most haunted place in America. Well, that's true if something happened that night or that day.
Right.
It doesn't happen the next day. It's, loses its position as most haunted. Most days are business as usual, but every once in a while something happens, then it's the most haunted again.
Well, people talk about St. Augustine down here all the time because it's the oldest city in the country. I'm like, because it's old means it's haunted? I don't get that. Is there a correlation with old shit and being haunted?
I think it's the spook factor.
Sometimes
that's what I think.
The spook factor. If you go into a decrepit building that's falling apart, people are going to believe that they're dealing with haunted phenomenon because it's a spooky environment. It entices the mind to start thinking that there's something there. So of course, like with New England, we're the oldest in the country,
right? With the way the homes are Victorian.
This is the most haunted location in the country. It's been here since 1636.
Right. Yeah.
So it's
back to the witch trials, that type of thing.
Yeah. So, Steve, we're at the end of 9 o'clock here. We don't want to keep you too long because I understand you have a lot of time on your hands and you probably want to smoke a cigar and probably drink yourself to sleep. Who knows?
Man has a lot of time on his hands.
I'm just joking. That's what I'm saying.
He was digging holes all day. She was throwing.
That's what I'm saying. He's probably tired.
She was throwing bricks and pipes into a dumpster.
I was doing nothing.
Yeah, we had a
long day. I got a crazy crew of guys down here that we all, all you got to say is, I'm looking at, I put a flagpole in. You got 3 guys at your house and we're all digging holes now. It's any excuse to get together and have a few beers,
So with that being said, Steve, we really greatly appreciate
very much so. We're so grateful for your time. And
before, of course, we know you have the Dead Files that is a concurrent thing right now. And is there any other projects you have going on? Anything that you'd like to disclose to the people, your fans, our listeners, that you have anything going on?
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys having me on, number one. Thank you so much. I really had fun tonight. And thanks for listening to me rant. I do that once in a while.
It's an encounter session, our show. We're not going to answer these questions, but we're going to.
I have nothing as far as another television show or anything like that in the works. The only thing I have in the works is my house. I'm always working on something here. That's about it for me to work. I mean, Dead Files takes up so much of my time, and to be honest with you, I don't think any network is really interested in today's social way of things. They don't like a guy like me. I think I'm too rough around the edges for them. I'm too to the point. I don't fit into the mold of today's television shows that they want. So I think Dead Files will probably be the end for me once it's over. But if you would have told me 10 years ago that I'd still be doing a show, I would have bet my house on it that I wouldn't be. You know, for me, it's just every time we get picked up for another season, it's like, really?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
I'm always waiting to, you know, I got to go get a job, you know, shit like that. And so, you know, and it's it's a crappy business because you never know what, they just don't tell you anything. And then next thing you know, oh, we got picked up. Well, thanks. 7 months have passed. I haven't had a paycheck. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Yeah. It's not a very nice business, but you know, I'm in it. I hate to say it, but I go out. I have this argument with my producers. I'm like, oh, your business is bullshit. They're like, I hate to upset you, but you're in the business now.
A bullshit business. Yeah, well, it's not exactly stability, is it?
No. And you know, and coming from a civil service background between the Marine Corps and the police department, I was used to my paycheck every 2 weeks for 30 years, you know, 25 years. And to go from, and then even when I retired, I worked for the city again. So to go from that to not knowing anything, it's hard for me to, and you got an ex-wife breathing down your neck for money. It's like, me no like it.
Poltergeist again. Went full circle with that. Yeah. And the throwing objects and all.
But I appreciate you guys having me on. I had a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad you did. Mama, at least do you have anything at the end of the night tonight?
I do have a cold case I'm working on if you want to give me a hand.
Oh my!
Yeah.
She's
my wheelhouse.
She genuinely has a cold. It's from 1915. She has uncovered so much information.
Wow.
If she keeps on, she's going to find spray paint on her car. You know, it's like stop now, desist. You know?
The ghost will come get me.
Yeah, that's my wheelhouse. Every time I talk to a cop on the show or a detective about a homicide, I miss the clowns, not the circus. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just I miss the work. I really do miss it. But you know, I'm doing this almost half as long as I was doing the other job. So
Wow.
I know it's crazy. You know, I'm 57 years old. I wasn't expecting to still be working at this point, but
you are working. You know, you must be doing something right because you're still popular, very popular.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing. You know, if I could just shout out to the fans. Without, you know, we have very loyal fans.
Yeah.
I interact with them quite often on Instagram because that's my only social media venue for fans. I shut down Twitter altogether. I couldn't take it anymore. And Facebook is just for my close family and, you know, my close friends and family. So I keep that very limited, nothing to do with the show. But Instagram is where I interact with the fans. And they're always, you know, they're watching reruns. I mean, who the hell wants to watch reruns? But they watch it and always ask me when the new show's coming out. So they're really loyal. So I want to thank them personally. And every time I see a fan, you know, I'm always humble and thank them and take photos, spend some time with them. So,
well, if you're ever up this way, Steve, we are fans of yours, of course, because you do great work, and of course your law enforcement background, especially being former military myself. You know, we have a great amount of respect for you. So, if you're ever up these ways again, holler and we'll have some coffee.
And if you want a cold case to work on, we can take some of the nicest Rhode Island restaurants. Whether you want red or white chowder, you know, and some coffee.
Wine.
Yes, wine here. And in fact, Elisa's going to be picking grapes tomorrow morning at a vineyard at a friend of hers. She does a lot of different things, eclectic interest, and she really does have a cold case. She's done, I think, she's done enormous research on it, and just haven't quite figured it all out yet because you know it's not living memory anymore. So. You know, but she figures that there's that one caveat she has to uncover, and she's digging at it. So she's got quite.
Maybe come and tell me who done it.
So we all wish we had that. Can you tell me who done it?
We just have to be distressed about it. That we're going to get more distressed than you know.
Carl, do you have anything else to say before we end tonight?
No, just that it's been very much a pleasure. We haven't yet had repeat guests because this is fairly new to us having guest commentator, guest panelist, but certainly like to have you on. I figure we could do part 2 easily. Go through another.
Listen, these radio shows keep me away from the cigar bar with the boys, so I one night.
Well, you don't have any.
Where the fuck are you? What are you doing? What's going on? And I'm like, what part of I had a radio show that I didn't understand? And they think I'm kidding to try to get out of going out with them.
Oh, we're a legitimate distraction for you. Yeah.
A good distraction.
We're a harmless vice.
Well, once again, Steve, thank you very much for the listeners, fans of the Dead Files, fans of Steve, listeners of Duo Daemonologie, and people that follow our work. Thank you. Remember, guys, that the people that are listening that are going to be there this Saturday for Hunting the Sea Witch at USS Salem, we have sent an email out. Please check your emails because there are guidelines due to COVID we have to follow. We want to keep you all safe.
Which are a little bit customized for a ship, a battleship that will be on.
But we are meeting the deadlines, the regulations. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And, of course, other events. We do know what next week's topic is, but we'll announce that tomorrow. It has somewhat similar subject matter to this, but a little bit different.
Maybe Steve will write in a question or something and blow
There you
up.
go.
Yeah, we might have to get Steve to write us a question on that topic. But look forward to that announcement tomorrow. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.